Well, the first person in Hong Kong to be prosecuted under the city's sweeping new national security law has been denied bail after appearing in court on Monday. Tong Ying-kit, who's 23, was charged with inciting secession and terrorist activities and is accused of ramming his motorbike into a group of police officers, injuring at least 3 of them at a pro-democracy protest on Wednesday. Tong, who was hospitalised after the incident and appeared at the West Kowloon Magistrates Court in a wheelchair, was allegedly carrying a Liberate Hong Kong banner at the time. Now, grounds for inciting secession under the new law. The legislation imposed on the territory by Beijing last week criminalises secession, subversion, terrorism and collusion with foreign powers. People who are convicted of such crimes can face sentences of up to life in prison. Well, to try and understand what this case entails and what this new law means for Hong Kongers, we're now joined via Skype by Simon Cheng, a Hong Kong national now exiled in the UK. The UK granted him asylum after he was allegedly tortured in China and accused of inciting political unrest in the city. He's on Skype. Thank you so much indeed for joining us and welcome to the programme, Simon.
Nice to meet you, and thanks for your invitation.
All right, well, let's start with your story because you've been in the UK now just around 6 months. You had to leave China. Tell us about what led to you being arrested and you having to leave.
Yeah, well, I went last year in the midst of the anti-extradition bill protests. It's about in August. And I was on a business trip representing the British Consulate General in Hong Kong. And when I back to actually in the downtown, in the heartland of Hong Kong, it's in the West Kowloon. That is a high-speed railway station. However, that the specific land had been carved to the Chinese jurisdiction. I've been stopped by the border force, and then they said they received the senior leader's instruction, and I've been delivered back to Shenzhen, to mainland China, and finally they hand me over to a bunch of plain school officers. They gave no badges, and afterwards I realized that they're working for the state security. And I've been put into the steel cell and I have to sit on the tiger chair and to receive a series of the political interrogation that ask me lots of the political questions, including what's the UK roles behind the protest and whether I joined the protest on the front line and who had joined the protest, etc., etc. So I was so shocked because that is the first time I've been detained and asked that kind of the interrogation. They asked what I did and what I said in Hong Kong, and it's supposed to most of the Hong Kong people it's nothing to do with the mainland Chinese police. But now they just cross the border, and after less than a year, the secret police just crossed the border, and what I've been treated could be applied to most of the Hong Kong people. And now.
And you were tortured whilst you were in police custody?
Yes, exactly. When I've been detained, they ask me out almost every day for the interrogation, and I've been blindfolded, booted, shackled, and handcuffed, and they put me into the private van, even not a police car, and they delivered me to the unknown secret place for torture. They said they're working for the secret service, and there's no human rights there. And I've been asked to raise my hands up for countless hours. And if you do remember, and even one of the prominent human rights lawyers in mainland China, Wang Quanzhang, also, when he had been released, he told to Japanese media, said he also had been through torture. And he also said that he had been asked to raise his hands up for continuously 15 hours. And so painful and sore. And also I've been asked to do squats and for countless hours. And once I shivered, and then they would beat me using the sharpened baton. And I've been deprived of sleep. I was not allowed to sleep. And once I'm punished to stand still for countless hours as well. And I cannot move. If I move a bit, they would beat me. And also, they would ask me, as a punishment, to sing the Chinese anthem and saying that could wake me up. And also, I was not allowed to say any word except they permit to say. And anything if I want to say, I need to say, report to my master in Mandarin, and then they will let me speak. Otherwise, they will slap my mouth and slap my face as well. So I would say that is a torture. And also, and I've been put into the solitary confinement without providing any legitimate reasons. And based on the definition of the United Nations, that is psychological torture, I would say, because I blocked all the communication with the inmates and with my family members and even my lawyer at that time.
So I suppose, given your experience, this new law is a concern because it will make it easier for mainland China to deal with anybody that they see as a threat to their rule.
Yes, exactly. I'm so worrying because at that time I was detained, and I guess I was the first whistleblower. Although I'm not the first, but few Hong Kong citizens have been interrogated by the secret police in past few decades. But, however, that's my first whistleblower that I speak out after I've been let out and fled from Hong Kong to Taiwan and now in London. And at that time, like the interrogators already warned me, they would cross the border someday. But at that time, just hard to imagine, less than a year, what they claim becomes now an undeniable reality. So what I would say, possibly that's the Hong Kong people never ever, or just a few Hong Kong people, they experienced the interrogation by the secret police, by the state security police from mainland China. But I would say that they're simply out of law. They would just do whatever they want. And now the national security law just empower those secret police to come to Hong Kong to do anything. So you can see first, that's the full details based on the full details of the national security law. First, the process is under the table. It's absolutely in secrecy. So at the very, very last minute, only the public can see the full details. How could they say they are democracy? That is the first one. And also you can see that's the Hong Kong government now promulgating the national security law with more details. They empower the Hong Kong police to access the internet and to ask more personal information, and they also can freeze their access whatever they want, and then they can raid the house without warrant, or even they just simply get permission from the senior officials. So all the things you can see, that's even the library, the book have been censored. So I could find any excuse to help the Chinese authority or Hong Kong authority to keep saying that the two system is still alive, or they're not totalitarianism. Actually, what they're doing now, they simply show the true color to the world is that they are totalitarian rule.
All right, so given this new law and the way it's playing out, what is likely to happen to Tong Ying-kit, who's the first person we believe to be charged under this new law? What's likely happening behind closed doors?
Well, I would say that it still maintain a bit, like autonomy in Hong Kong, with they in charge of even the national security cases. It depends on how serious the crime is, because that's they pretend, their leniency to let the Hong Kong government, even the Hong Kong police, to handle some specific national security case. So it depends on to what level that's the how serious it is to the central government. I mean, the Beijing, what they think. For example, like my case, definitely, if I back to Hong Kong, that's those secret police headquarters from mainland China based in Hong Kong. They will handle it, and even they will deliver me back to mainland China legally. But what I suspect that's this case, for example, is not that, like high profile or even relevant to diplomacy with foreign powers. So I suspect that would still have been handled by the new established national security unit as a part of the Hong Kong police force to handle it. And it totally depends on the mercy of Hong Kong authorities now, because if they wanted to convince the people, at least saying that, okay, that's the national security law, just target a small amount of the people, small amounts of the population who they said is a terrorist, then they would use it. and possibly that's they appoint different judges to handle the case, and depends on whether they would feel is suitable. But it's so arbitrary because, like that, people they just raise the flag saying Hong Kong independence, or even not directly relevant to Hong Kong independence. For example, like liberate Hong Kong, revolution of our time, and they said that is equal. That is meaning Hong Kong independence is just arbitrarily divided by the government. So I would say it depends totally up on their mercy. There's no rule of law at all now. They'll just empower those people and legislate whatever they want as a law and to persecute the people. So I can't predict. I'm sorry, I can't predict what he had been treated. But I would say, if possible, Beijing has a legal way to deliver him back to mainland China and could be directly disappear, because they would say it's relevant to national security and sensitive information. So his legal right could be protected, as usually they would say to most of the people saying when they persecute like Liu Xiaobo and more political dissidents, they just simply disappear. So that is quite worrying, because now it's come to Hong Kong.
What do you think is the biggest fear that Beijing has? They had promised this two systems, one country, and that gave Hong Kong some autonomy, but it does seem that they're pulling back on that. What is it about what's happening in Hong Kong that Beijing fears the most, do you think?
Well, I would think that previously Beijing still wanted to let Hong Kong to get, autonomy. And because they want Hong Kong to be an example or sample to the world, that they keep up the promise that to let Hong Kong to run themselves as an international financial center. Because one of the benefits they can get is that they can show as a showcase to the world that they can expand their economic cooperation plan to the world. Actually, 2/3 of the FDI through Hong Kong to China, and then they also need Hong Kong to do the business with the world. So actually, it's quite valuable for China, and especially if they wanted to do the business with the world. However, recent protests actually give a clear signal to Beijing, and then they're a little bit worried about now that Hong Kong could endanger the state security. In terms of the state security, by definition of Beijing, it means the political security. It means that people could challenge the one-party rules in China. So that's the things they think the cost would outweigh the benefit. So they cannot put up with it, and then they worry about so-called the foreign meddling to do, like the revolution or even color revolution or even the political systematic change and affecting to mainland Chinese audience. So they now set up the national security law, and they think that is top priority. Political security, the political state security will be always the top priority of the Chinese communist regime. The economic benefits is just a side benefit they would get, and they want to get it. But once, if you trade off, they will protect their own party's interest more than the whole people.
All right. So what do Hong Kongers actually want as an end game? Is it a completely independent territory? And are Hong Kongers on the same page? One gets a sense that perhaps different generations think slightly differently on how to deal with Beijing.
Well, I would say that is, like polarized now in society. And no matter the people now, especially the younger generation, they want to revolt in more radical way, because they are patient enough for waiting for many, many, many years, that finally what they can get is that the so-called universal suffrage need to be pre-selected by Beijing first. So the majority of the people cannot accept that kind of things is democracy, but they can't accept that's a democracy with Chinese characteristics. So they want to, fight more, but afterwards that Beijing show the true colors that at the maximum I can get you like this, but live it or take it. And so the people just live it, and then they finding another way to fight for the full democracy. So unfortunately, Beijing now is going to be more powerful and assertive. And now they also hijack the state and people and saying that's the belief, the stronger country or the country with solidarity, with integrated together, it needs to be a very strong leadership by the party to maintain. So it means that most of China, not many Chinese people, they would just like to wanted to stick a stand with the party apparatus. So you can see that it's defined division between Hong Kong people and mainland Chinese people, and also that even the Hong Kong people now they need to take side and make choice. Is that whether they now to stand with this authoritarian regime and saying we are patriotic, we stand with China, and you guys is a separatist, or the other side is that they wanted to get more democracy, but they have been blamed as traitor and separatist, and then they possibly in the future they even wanted to throw the identity as Chinese all the way because that is a part of propaganda purpose. So I think that is the worrying signal, is that to Hong Kong in the future, it's still very polarized. It's not about just Hong Kong issue, it's about the world. Because the international community see now Beijing's wanted to show the iron fist and heavy-handed policy on Hong Kong. And they were worried about whether the Chinese rule could be expanded to Taiwan, to South China Sea, whether they would just change the foreign policy to the neighborhood. So that's the things would make the international society now coming to be like more Cold War era.
All right. So Hong Kong does have its own unique history, especially when it was a British territory, but it is now part of China. And so what do you say to people who say, but hang on, Hong Kong is China? Why should Hong Kong people be treated differently to all the other citizens of China across the country?
Well, I would say first is that we are all human beings, and we do believe that democracy and freedom is universal values. It's nothing to do whether you are Chinese, you're British, you're South African, or anything or anyone. It's about the human being. As for example, like the history of South Africa. Your founding fathers, that Mandela also, sacrificed for a lot and then have been in prison for over a decade, fight for their people's equality. So that is the things to inspire even to Hong Kong people, is because what we think that is right is that we need to have a checks and balance, and we have a legal right and legitimate right to criticize those people who hold power. So we are the people who don't have any power. So we need international support. We also very care about those mainland Chinese people, if they want to fight for their freedoms and even more democracy, just like decades ago, those young Chinese students in Beijing, in Tiananmen Square, unfortunately have been suppressed by tank and soldiers by this regime. And we also mourn it every year. And the biggest vigil and mourning for those people have been sacrificed for democracy movement in Beijing, mainland China, every year in Hong Kong. So we do think that we share the similar and even the same value. And now we can see that's a secret police who did a lot of human rights abuse and very, very bad trace record previously. And the torture actually happens in mainland China. If you just check the verdicts by the mainland China court, you just simply leave the critical comment online about Chinese leadership or Chinese authority. You could be detained, you could be interrogated, you could be directly disappeared and detained for 1 or 2 years and then back to home. Something like that, we cannot put up with this. We cannot turn the blind eye from that tragedy. A lot of tragedy happens. So now as it comes to across the border, I hope that it's not about based on the two systems, one country, so the Hong Kong people can enjoy more freedom than those mainland Chinese people. It's just unequal, I would say. It's just unequal. Okay. I would say that's all the people they need to stand together.
All right. Simon Cheng, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much indeed for giving us your time. And we hope that you'll be able to return safely to Hong Kong sometime in the future.
Yeah, when we'll be back, we'll be back with democracy and freedom.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's Simon Cheng, who lives in London now, who fled and was given asylum after being tortured, he says, by Chinese authorities on the mainland. And he was working with the British consulate at the time, and he was asked what its role does Britain have in the protests that were taking place.